My only daughter told me I was not welcome at her wedding. She told me on a Tuesday afternoon, on a phone call I had not been expecting, that my presence would ruin the photos. Those were her exact words, ruin the photos. As if I were a smudge on a window, as if the woman who had carried her for 9 months, raised her for 28 years, and paid for every dollar of the wedding she was now uninviting me from was an aesthetic problem. I did not argue with her. I did not cry, not on the phone, not while she was listening. I told my daughter I understood. I told her I hoped she had a beautiful day. I told her I loved her. Then I hung up the phone and I sat at my kitchen table for 46 minutes, looking at a half-empty cup of tea. And then I called my late husband's estate attorney. My name is Helen. I am 58 years old. 3 weeks ago, my daughter Olivia got married, and on the morning of her wedding, she found out something I had never told her in 28 years of motherhood. She found out that the woman she had spent her life underestimating had also been the woman who had been holding up her entire life from underneath. And she found out, in the worst possible moment, exactly what happens when that woman finally lets go. Let me tell you about Olivia first, because if you do not understand who I raised her to be, the rest of this does not make sense. Olivia is my only child. Her father, Peter, died of a sudden brain aneurysm when Olivia was 11. He was 43 years old. We had been married for 14 years. He was the love of my life. Peter had been a financial advisor, a good one. He had built, quietly over those 14 years, a small portfolio of investments and life insurance and a trust account specifically labeled Olivia, Wedding Day. He had funded that account every birthday of hers, starting from when she was 2 years old. On the day Peter died, that account had $380,000 in it. By the time Olivia was 28 and engaged, that account, with compound interest, had grown to just over $640,000. Olivia did not know about this account. Peter had asked me in one of our last conversations before he died. He was in the hospital on a quiet Tuesday morning with the late autumn sun coming through the window, to never tell her about the account until her wedding day. He wanted it to be a surprise. He wanted her, in his words, to know in that moment that her father had loved her enough to plan for a day he never lived to see. I had kept that promise for 17 years. I raised Olivia on a teacher's salary in a small house in Connecticut. I drove a 2008 Honda Civic until it died on the highway when Olivia was 19. I bought my clothes at consignment stores. I ate cereal for dinner more nights than I will ever admit to anyone. And every time Olivia came to me asking for something, the private high school, the European semester abroad, the apartment in Boston for graduate school, I said yes, because I had access to Peter's account, and I had decided a long time ago that the way to honor my late husband was to give our daughter the life he had wanted to give her himself. She did not know. She thought I was, in her words, to her college roommate one Christmas, a conversation I had overheard from the hallway and never told her about, unbelievably resourceful for a teacher. She thought I was magic with money. She thought I had surprised everyone by being able to pay for things. She did not know that her father had been paying for it, from the grave, every dollar. Olivia got engaged in October of last year to a man named Brandon. Brandon was 32 years old. He was an investment banker. He came from a family that owned a chain of hardware stores in Connecticut, and his mother, a woman named Vivian, had decided the moment she met me at our engagement dinner that I was not what they had hoped for in their future daughter-in-law's family. I overheard Vivian say this to Brandon in the hallway near the bathroom of the restaurant when she had thought I was already in my car. She said, "Brandon, I love you, but stop. Olivia adores her mother." Vivian had said, "We will see about that." Over the next 8 months, Vivian worked on Olivia. I do not have proof of every conversation, but I watched my daughter, who had been my best friend for 28 years, slowly start correcting me at family dinners. Mom, that's not how you say it. Mom, please don't wear that to the rehearsal. Mom, can you maybe not bring up Daddy at the wedding events? Brandon's family doesn't want it to be a sad evening. That last one was on a Wednesday in March. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, my daughter called me and told me I was not welcome at her wedding. She said it with that voice people use when they have rehearsed something, the voice you hear from a child who has been told what to say and is now saying it as if it were his own. She said, "Mom, I have to be honest. Brandon's family thinks it would be best if you didn't come. They think your presence would ruin the photos. I know this is hard, but we need this day to be perfect. I want you to know I love you, and we can have a special dinner just the two of us afterwards." I waited for her to finish. I asked her, "Olivia, did you write those words yourself?" There was a long pause. She said, "Mom, don't do that." I said, "I love you. I hope you have a beautiful day." And I hung up the phone. I sat at my kitchen table. I did not cry because I was past crying. I had been crying since March, in private, every night in the bathtub. I had used up all the tears I had to use over a daughter who was slowly turning into a woman I did not recognize. Now I just sat. I looked at the half-empty cup of tea. I looked at the wedding invitation on my refrigerator, the one Olivia had given me 4 months ago, embossed in cream and gold with my name printed inside as Mother of the Bride. I thought about Peter. I thought about that hospital room in November, 17 years ago, when he had taken my hand and made me promise that I would tell Olivia about the account on her wedding day. "Helen," he had said, "when the moment is right, you tell her. You tell her that her father loved her enough to save for the day he would never see, and you give her that gift. Promise me." I had promised. And for 17 years, I had thought the right moment meant the morning of her wedding, the way Peter had imagined it. A mother and her daughter in a small kitchen before the dress went on. A moment of love. Now my daughter had banned me from her wedding, so the right moment had become something else. I picked up my phone and I called Marcus Pemberton, who had been Peter's estate attorney for 23 years. Marcus answered on the third ring. I said, "Marcus, it's Helen Whitaker. I need to talk to you about Peter's wedding trust account for Olivia." Marcus said, "Of course, Helen. Are you ready to begin the disbursement process? The wedding is, 2 weeks away?" I said, "Marcus, I need to know my legal options. Olivia just informed me that I am not invited to her wedding. I want to know whether I am required to release that account to her on her wedding day, or whether the timing is at my discretion." Marcus was silent for almost 10 seconds. Then he said, "Helen, can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" I said yes. And that was the end of the woman my daughter had spent 28 years underestimating. Block 2 ends the next morning in Marcus's office and ends 3 weeks later on the morning of the wedding. Marcus Pemberton was 67 years old. He had practiced estate law in our county for 41 years. He had been at Peter's funeral. He had sat next to me at the reception and told me, with his hand on top of mine, that he would protect Peter's little girl for the rest of his career. In his office that Wednesday morning, Marcus opened a folder and took out the trust documents Peter had signed in 2007. He read aloud the relevant clause. "The assets of this trust shall be transferred to Olivia Marie Whitaker on the occasion of her marriage, at the sole discretion of the trustee, namely the surviving spouse of the grantor, within a window of 90 days surrounding the wedding date." Marcus looked up at me. He said, "Helen, Peter wrote that clause specifically. He told me at the time that he wanted you to have control over the timing. He said, and I am quoting from my notes, 'Helen will know if Olivia has earned this gift. I trust her judgment more than I trust my own.'" I sat very still. Marcus said, "In other words, Helen, the money is yours to disperse, or not, on whatever timeline you decide. Up to 90 days after the wedding if you choose, indefinitely if you choose. You are the trustee. The decision is yours." I asked Marcus what would happen if I never dispersed it. He said, If you do not transfer the assets within the 90-day window after Olivia's marriage, the trust language reverts ownership of the principal to you as the surviving spouse, permanently. Olivia would have no further legal claim. I asked Marcus if Olivia knew the trust existed. Marcus said, "She does not. I have never communicated with her about it. Per Peter's instructions, only you and I have ever known." I sat with that for a long time. Then I told Marcus what I wanted to do. I told Marcus I did not want to punish my daughter. I want to say that out loud because I want you to understand the difference between what I did and revenge. Revenge would have been keeping the entire $640,000 and never telling her it had ever existed. That was not what I wanted. What I wanted was for my daughter to know, on the morning of her wedding, exactly what her mother had been carrying for 17 years. And then I wanted my daughter to make a choice. Marcus drafted, that afternoon, a letter on his firm's letterhead, addressed to Olivia, to be hand-delivered by a courier to her hotel suite at 7 a.m. on the morning of her wedding. The letter contained 3 things. First, a brief explanation, in 2 short paragraphs, of the trust account her father had set up for her in 2007, the dollar amount as of that date, $643,212. Second, a detailed breakdown of every expense Olivia had ever asked her mother to cover since the age of 12 that had been paid out of that same trust: the private high school, the European semester, the Boston apartment, the graduate school tuition, the car when she was 22, the down payment on her first condo at 26, and, most relevantly, every single dollar of the wedding she was now hosting: the venue, the dress, the photographer, the 4-tiered cake, the open bar, the $80,000 guest list. Total disbursed from the trust to Olivia over 17 years was $412,000. Remaining in the trust as of the morning of the wedding, $231,000. Third, a single sentence: the remainder of the trust will not be dispersed. As trustee, Helen Whitaker has elected to terminate the disbursement schedule. The remaining balance will be retained by the trust's surviving grantor in perpetuity. Marcus Pemberton, Esquire. That was the entire letter. Marcus and I reviewed it together for an hour. He asked me twice if I was sure. I told him I had never been more sure of anything in my life. He filed the paperwork, the courier was scheduled, and I went home and I made dinner and I watched television and I waited for 2 weeks. Olivia received the courier at 7:14 a.m. on a Saturday in May. I know the time because Marcus called me at 9:30 that morning to tell me what had happened next. Olivia had read the letter alone in the bridal suite of the hotel where the wedding was being held. She had read it, according to the courier's report, 3 times. She had then called Marcus's emergency line at 7:31 a.m. Marcus had answered. Olivia had said, and Marcus took notes because that is what good attorneys do, the following: "This is a mistake. My mother would never do this." Marcus had told her, very gently, that the document was authentic, that the trust was real, that her father had set it up in 2007, and the disbursement schedule was, legally and technically, at her mother's sole discretion. Olivia had said, "My mother is a teacher. She does not have access to any kind of trust." Marcus had said, "Mrs. Talbot, forgive me, Olivia, your mother has been the trustee of an account containing $640,000 for 17 years. Every major expense in your life since you were 12 was paid out of that account, including this wedding." There had been a long pause. Olivia had said, "Can I speak to my mother?" Marcus had said, "Your mother has given me very clear instructions. She said, 'Tell my daughter I love her and that she hopes she has a beautiful day.'" There had been another long pause. Then Olivia had hung up. Marcus called me at 9:30 to tell me all of this. I thanked him, I made myself a cup of coffee, I sat at my kitchen table, and then I did something I had not done in 8 months. I drove to the cemetery where Peter is buried. I sat at his grave for 2 hours. I told him everything that had happened. I told him about the call from Olivia. I told him about Vivian. I told him about the letter. and I told him that I had finally made my daughter understand what kind of love she had been carried by for the first 28 years of her life. Whether she chooses to come back to me, Peter, I said, is up to her now. I have done what I could. I have done what you asked. I am tired, my love. I am going to go home and have a glass of wine and watch a movie. I miss you, Peter. Tell our daughter when she gets here someday that I tried. The wedding happened. Olivia got married to Brandon. She had a beautiful day, by all accounts. She did not call me that day. She did not call me the next day. She called me on the 7th day. She was crying when I picked up. She told me she had ended things with Vivian. She told me Brandon had been horrified when he found out what his mother had been doing for 8 months. She told me she was so sorry. I told her I loved her. I told her I needed time. I told her we would talk again, but not yet. It has been 3 weeks. We have spoken twice, both times briefly, both times she has cried, and I have stayed calm, and we have not yet spoken about the trust. The remaining $231,000 is still in the account. I have not decided what to do with it. I may give it to her someday when I am sure she has become the woman her father would have wanted me to give it to. Or I may donate it to a scholarship fund in Peter's name. Either way, my daughter will live the rest of her life knowing that her mother is not the woman she had assumed, that love is not infinite, that a mother who says yes for 28 years can, on the right Tuesday afternoon, say no, and mean it for the rest of her life. If you have ever been the parent who gave and gave and gave, if you have ever been excluded by the child you raised on the day they supposed to need you most, if you have ever wondered what would happen if you just stopped, leave one word in the comments below. The word is done. For every mother who finally drew a line and meant it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story. We share a new one every week about quiet women who knew exactly what they were doing the entire time everyone underestimated them. Until then, say no. It is allowed.